The phrase Dark Ages sounds terrifying. It suggests ignorance, chaos, 1,000 years of people forgetting how to think. According to the popular version of history, Rome fell, and then Europe collectively turned off its brain until the Renaissance showed up to save everyone. That story is neat, simple, and almost completely wrong, because the so-called Dark Ages were not dark. They were complicated. Where the idea of Dark Ages came from. The term Dark Ages wasn't invented by medieval people. It was invented later by Renaissance writers. They loved ancient Rome. They loved Greek philosophy, and they wanted to make themselves look like heroes. So they framed history like this. Ancient Rome equals light. Middle Ages equals darkness. Renaissance, light returns. It was a branding strategy. Calling the previous centuries dark made the Renaissance feel brighter. History, unfortunately, does not care about marketing. The fall of Rome didn't kill knowledge. Let's start with the biggest myth. When the Western Roman Empire fell, people didn't forget how to read, farm, build, or think. What actually collapsed was central administration. Rome had roads, taxes, bureaucracy, and armies holding everything together. When that system disappeared in the West, life became more local. Smaller kingdoms, regional power, less coordination. But local does not mean stupid. Monks, the most underrated nerds in history. If knowledge survived the so-called Dark Ages, one group deserves serious credit. Monks. Monasteries became centers of learning, copying, and preservation. They copied Roman texts, Greek philosophy, mathematics, medical knowledge, by hand, slowly, painfully. Without monks, much of ancient knowledge would have vanished completely. They weren't hiding knowledge, they were saving it. Science didn't stop, it changed location. While Western Europe reorganized, the Islamic world experienced a golden age. Scholars in Baghdad, Cordoba, and Damascus translated Greek texts, expanded mathematics, advanced astronomy, and developed medicine. Algebra, optics, hospitals. Much of what Europe later discovered came back through these scholars. Knowledge didn't disappear, it traveled. Medieval people were not anti-science. The idea that medieval people rejected reason is exaggerated. Yes, religion mattered deeply, but religion and inquiry were not opposites. Many medieval scholars believed studying nature was a way to understand God's creation. Universities emerged during this period. Bologna, Paris, Oxford. These were not dark places. They were debate-heavy, argumentative, and obsessed with logic. If anything, medieval scholars argued too much. Technology quietly improved. Here's something people rarely mention. Medieval Europe improved daily life in practical ways. Heavy plows improved agriculture. Crop rotation increased food supply. Watermills and windmills mechanized labor. Horse collars increased efficiency. These weren't flashy breakthroughs, but they fed people. And fed people innovate. Art didn't disappear. It changed style. Medieval art is often dismissed as crude. That's a misunderstanding of intention. Medieval artists weren't trying to copy Roman realism. They focused on symbolism, storytelling, and religious meaning. Manuscripts were illuminated with color and detail. Cathedrals pushed architectural boundaries. Music evolved through chant and early harmony. This wasn't artistic darkness, it was a different aesthetic. Violence was not unique to the period. Another popular claim, the Dark Ages were uniquely violent. They weren't. Ancient Rome was violent. The Renaissance was violent. Modern history is violent. Medieval warfare was smaller in scale than Roman imperial campaigns. Life was harder, yes. More local, yes. But not uniquely savage. The real problem, fewer records. So why does a period feel dark? Because fewer people were writing things down. Rome left us tons of documents. Medieval Europe left fewer centralized records. Historians hate gaps, and when records are missing, it's tempting to assume nothing happened. That assumption is lazy. The Eastern Roman Empire ruins the narrative. Here's an inconvenient fact. The empire didn't even fully fall. The Eastern Roman Empire, what we call Byzantium, survived for another 1,000 years. They had cities, libraries, trade, law. If the Dark Ages were truly universal darkness, Byzantium shouldn't exist. But it did, very visibly. The Renaissance didn't come from nowhere. The Renaissance was often portrayed as a miracle. Suddenly, art, science, reason. But miracles don't work like that. The Renaissance was built on medieval foundations, preserved texts, universities, trade networks, translation movements. It wasn't a rebirth from nothing. It was a continuation. So why the reputation stuck? Because the label was useful. Calling the Middle Ages dark flatters later generations, simplifies history, creates a clean story arc. But history isn't clean. It's layered. The Middle Ages were a transition, not a collapse. The medieval period was not a step backward. It was a reorganization. From centralized empire to local systems, from imperial bureaucracy to regional governance, from Roman identity to European identities. Change feels messy in hindsight, but mess is not darkness. What people were actually doing. People were farming, trading, building towns, writing, teaching, worshiping, innovating. Life didn't pause. It adapted. Final myth-busting. The Dark Ages were not a 1,000-year blackout, a war on knowledge, a collapse of intelligence. They were a misunderstood era, with fewer records and less centralized power. Dark only if you refuse to look closely. Closing. History doesn't move in straight lines. It bends. It shifts. It reorganizes. The Middle Ages weren't a failure of civilization. They were a bridge. And bridges don't get enough credit because people only notice them when they're gone.